everybody across the board, businesses, everybody's getting a tax cut, especially the middle class. And I said that I may have to increase it on the wealthy. I'm not going to allow it to be increased on the middle class. Now, if I increase it on the wealthy, that means they're still going to be paying less than they pay now. I'm not talking about increasing from this point. I'm talking about increasing from my tax proposal.
Donald Trump is now the presumptive Republican nominee presiding over a deeply divided GOP, or maybe not. That was him earlier this week, talking about his tax plan. Today he met with Speaker Paul Ryan and the Republican leadership to mend fences. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders continues to dog Hillary Clinton after winning the West Virginia primary this week. To tell us how the Trump-Ryan summit went and to give us his thoughts on the important economic issues at play in this race, I'm joined by CNBC senior contributor and radio host Larry Kudlow. Larry, thanks for being back on the show.
Thank you, Raymond. It's great. Thank you very much.
Larry, you and Stephen Moore at the Heritage Foundation were apparently called in, according to reports, to adapt the tax strategy and the economic plan of Donald Trump. What did you do here?
Well, let me be clear. We have a group, Raymond, called the Committee to Unleash Prosperity.
Right.
And the founders are Steve Forbes, Art Laffer, Steve Moore, and myself. And we have advised all the candidates. We've met with them, had dinner with them. We've even invited Hillary and Bernie, although somehow they lost the invitations. But Donald Trump has been one of the people we've helped with, and of course, he's the last man standing. So it's not exactly true. We've made some suggestions to the Trump campaign, and they're really tweaking his tax reform plan, which I have supported, by the way, for many, many months, his tax plan, particularly his business tax cuts. And we're tweaking around the edges to try to find maybe more economic growth and a lower deficit issue. That's really what it amounts to. By the way, this is all informal. Mr. Trump has not seen final suggestions, and he hasn't signed off on final suggestions.
Okay.
That's really the long and short of it.
Okay. I'm going to put up a full screen to compare the candidates' tax plans. Now, this is just the income tax rate for individual, ordinary income. Look at this. Donald Trump, he establishes 4 tax brackets with rates of 0%, 10%, 20%, and 25%. The top rate applies to incomes over $150,000 for single filers and $300,000 for joint filers. Hillary Clinton adds a 4% surtax on income over $5 million. And Bernie Sanders, he apparently establishes 4 new tax brackets, 37%, 43%, 48%, and 52%. The top rate applies to taxable income over $10 million, and it raises the rates of all other brackets by 2.2%. Larry Kudlow, how do you see these? What will be the impact of these plans on this economy, this slow-growing economy?
Well, let me just begin with Donald Trump. I mean, he is a tax cutter. I mean, right now, his tax plan has a 25% top rate.
Right.
The current top rate is 39.6% plus, plus, plus. So that's a significant tax cut. And he has said that it may have to, the top rate may have to rise on the wealthiest. I say may. It hasn't been determined yet, but I don't think it would go any higher than 28%.
Is that
so
what you'd
still
like to see?
Represents significant tax relief. One of the suggestions we've made informally is to maybe put that top rate to 28. That's where Ronald Reagan left it, by the way, in the tax bill of 1986, 1987. Unfortunately, Hillary and Bernie Sanders are both raising income taxes substantially. And the schedule you mentioned for Mr. Sanders, well, he said a lot of different things in the campaign. Sometimes he said the income tax should go to 70 or 80%. But the point I want to make is Trump's plan, whether it's business tax cuts or individual tax cuts, is a pro-growth, classic free market supply-side plan, very much along the lines of Ronald Reagan and Jack Kemp. On the other hand, Mrs. Clinton's plan and Bernie Sanders' plan is a tax increase. She wants to raise taxes on capital gains. She has not embraced tax reform. She wants to raise individual taxes, as you noted. I believe, by the way, she's in favor of a payroll tax hike, or she's gone back and forth on that. Bernie Sanders wants a payroll tax hike, so that's a tax hike on the middle class, for heaven's sakes. I don't see how that solves the problem of less than 2% growth.
Now, Larry Kudlow, you just said that you see this Trump plan as pretty classic supply side, almost Reagan-esque. So why is Paul Ryan and certain other leaders on Capitol Hill giving Trump such a hard time and the reluctance to embrace him if he's embracing, at least in the economic sphere, what so many of them have desired for so long?
Well, listen, Paul Ryan is a great friend of mine. He's a man of really great integrity. I don't know that they disagree on taxes. I'm not privy to that information yet. Where they, in fact, I think Paul will embrace the Trump tax plan. That's what my sense is. On the other hand, there are disagreements, no question, on trade, protectionism. There are disagreements on immigration, and there are disagreements about entitlement reform. And I'm told by sources that all of those issues came up in the meeting today. Now, Ryan was very gracious, and it sounds to me like they are going to get together, and Ryan will endorse Donald Trump, but they're still moving. It's a process, Raymond. These things don't happen overnight, but it sounds like it's going to have a happy ending to it.
Well, I'm going to play while we're talking about it, and then we'll get back to one other element in the Trump plan, but I'm going to play that Paul Ryan soundbite following the meeting with Trump. Watch this.
I think we had a very encouraging meeting. Look, it's no secret that Donald Trump and I have had our differences. We talked about those differences today. I do believe that we are now planting the seeds to get ourselves unified, to bridge the gaps and differences.
How does this party come together, Larry? How do they unify at this point? You've still got Mitt Romney on the sidelines, you know, kind of throwing rocks at Donald Trump, saying, release your taxes. This disqualifies him from the race. I mean, how do you unify?
Well, look, I'm sorry Mr. Romney feels the way he does. He's a fine man. He's got great character. He doesn't like Trump. That's obvious. He sort of risks becoming the Harold Stassen of the Republican Party. He's run for office so many times and unfortunately failed. But putting that aside, look, these things happen every 4 years. You've always got primaries. They're difficult. They're divisive. A lot of things are said. But at the end of the day, you can come together. I have no doubt, by the way, the Republican Party will come together. Look, I'm not a spokesman for the GOP. I'm not a spokesman for Mr. Trump. I was quite interested to hear that Ryan today basically said we will come together, even though we may not agree on everything. You know, you never agree on everything. Yeah. That's the nature of politics and policy. But let me make one important point. On the Trump side, recent polls show that he's in a dead heat with Hillary Clinton, nationwide and also in key states like Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Now, the reason I mention that is there are some opponents of Trump who claim his nomination will lead to a Hillary landslide. These numbers contradict that. There is not going to be a landslide. They are even right now, and Trump hasn't even started to campaign. So I think that's a very important point. And after all, in the Republican Party, Raymond, they want to win. And they're not going to oppose a guy who's doing well in the polls and doing well in the campaign. And, you know, Trump's had big numbers in these. I believe he's the biggest vote getter in the history of Republican primaries.
True.
So
no
I'm
other
just
Republican
saying, how do they come together? They will come together. Yeah. They will come together. But it may not be unanimous. It may not be unanimous. It never is.
Yeah, but Larry, you know, we didn't have John Boehner coming out against Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan when they were the nominees. I mean, I'm sure they disagreed on things too. But to open it up to a public fracas, it does create a narrative that I'm not sure is helpful for the entire party or for the leadership on Capitol Hill, frankly.
Well, look, I don't know. There was, by the way, Romney had his opponents when he ran in 2008 and 2012 too. I mean, that's the nature of American politics. Look, Trump's campaign and his victory, I mean, he had a landslide in the primaries. It really comes out of the blue. I mean, it's one of the most astonishing political events in history, for heaven's sakes. So this thing happens fast. And you've got people that may not agree with everything he says. You know, by the way, I myself, I don't agree with him on trade, or at least I don't agree with raising tariffs. I do think we have to make China play fairly and by the rules. But there are some things I don't agree with deportation, okay? I do support his tax cut plan, as I said earlier, and I hope we have a moment to talk about his corporate tax cut.
Yeah, I want to get to that right now,
But
Larry.
putting that aside,
yeah, let's.
This is the normal give and take of politics.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about his corporate tax plans. We're going to put this up on the full screen. Donald Trump would lower the top corporate tax rate to 15%. Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders have no specific proposal yet. Your thoughts? What would that do to this economy? Do you think that would instigate things? By the way, that not only applies to big business, but small business as well, any corporation.
Right. That's very important, what you just said at the end. That's for C Corps and the smaller S Corp pass-throughs. I think it's a tremendous, tremendous proposal, and that's why I have been supporting it these many months. Look, I think that cutting the business tax across the board would be the single most important, significant economic growth stimulant possible. It would pick up growth, jobs, wages, investment. It would just be a tremendous thing. It would make America, I think, the most hospitable investment environment in the world, and I think trillions of dollars would flow to the U.S. Unfortunately, Mrs. Clinton will not embrace tax reform, and neither will Mr. Sanders. And in fact, Mrs. Clinton wants to raise investment taxes, as does Mr. Sanders. That is exactly the wrong prescription. The U.S. must become competitive, and we must have the right incentives for our companies to expand businesses, start new businesses, and hire workers at good wages. So to me, slashing the corporate tax is the single most important thing we could do.
Okay, I want to play this bite for you. This is Donald Trump talking about the debt, the United States debt. This raised a lot of eyebrows this week. Larry Kudlow, listen to this.
If we can buy back government debt at a discount, in other words, if interest rates go up and we can buy bonds back at a discount, if we are liquid enough as a country, we should do that. In other words, we can buy back debt at a discount.
Don't you run the danger, Larry, of breaking the credit of our country and devaluing the dollar? I mean, don't we end up, if we buy back debt, in a default situation like Greece or Argentina?
Well, no, not necessarily. Now, this is a little bit in the weeds, but Mr. Trump, I think, misspoke and walked it back. He suggested that we would pay down our debt at 70 or 80 cents on the dollar to get rid of the debt. But then he walked that back and he said correctly, we must not do anything that would damage the full faith and credit of the U.S. Treasury. We must not. It would be a catastrophe. It would be a catastrophe in
for the world.
Financial markets. Yeah. Now, having said that, yeah, all over the world, absolutely. Now, having said that, Mr. Trump, who is an astute corporate debt guy, he is saying something different. He's saying at some future point, if interest rates go up and bond prices go down, the U.S. government might want to buy back the debt at a discount. Now, right now, everything is trading at a premium because rates have fallen so much in recent years. So you wouldn't want to buy back the debt now at $150. You'd want to wait until it goes back to par at 100, and if it dropped to 80, then you might buy back the debt. So that's a long-term proposition. But Trump had another point that's worth pondering. Yeah. Why shouldn't we refinance, not restructure, but why shouldn't we refinance the U.S. Treasury debt and at these low interest rates, sell long-term bonds, 10 years, 30 years, at the low interest rates? That's a refinancing. That would save taxpayers a lot of money and would relieve the debt burden substantially. So he's got some good ideas, but he misspoke about 80 cents on the dollar for the U.S. Treasury. That's a non-starter, never happened, it shouldn't happen, and he walked it back because he confused that with corporate debt.
Okay, I've got to play this for you. Bernie Sanders is out there, of course, hammering Trump for being a businessman and calling out some of his difficulties that he's had in some of his investments, like in Atlantic City. Watch this.
The greed and the recklessness that we have seen from people like Donald Trump and Carl Icahn Oh, you know Donald Trump. Oh, I get it. You don't think he is a brilliant, successful businessman who can bring the kind of prosperity to America that he has brought here to Atlantic City. Is that your point?
So you heard that, Larry. Bernie Sanders is really taking on the mantle of the revolution here. He's asking to break up the banks. He wants free college. He wants free health care. He's asking for a payroll tax hike. Does this work?
No, it doesn't. I mean, it resonates among a group of people who are fed up with how things have gone wrong in the United States. By the way, Trump, it's the same populism as Donald Trump, although the solutions are significantly different. Look, Mr. Sanders is anti-business. He's a self-proclaimed socialist. Mr. Sanders made a statement a while back that the business plan for Wall Street was fraud. Okay, so he wants to paint everybody as fraudulent. That's simply not true. That's not how American business works. Bernie Sanders is just a bit anti-business. He's anti-rich. He's anti-success. And the funny thing is, this is what I don't understand. He wants to make everything free. He wants to spend $20 trillion. That's what it's been estimated at. He wants to raise taxes by roughly the same amount. He wants to give away, as you said, free education, free tuition, free health care. Okay, fine. You got to pay for that at some point.
Right.
But he also is raising taxes on the middle class. He wants a payroll tax hike. So it's like only the government wins under Mr. Sanders, never the private economy, never free enterprise. And I can tell you, as an economist, that is a prescription for stagnant growth, if any, for as far as the eye can see. I mean, after all, the Soviet Union system didn't work, Raymond. Eastern Europe's didn't work. They saw the light. China's didn't work. They've all been market reformers in the last 25 or 30 years. That revolution has bypassed Bernie Sanders.
Final question. Hillary Clinton is out there. She is advocating for paid leave for families. She's looking for debt-free college. There doesn't seem to be, however, a coherent economic plan, at least at this point, put forward. What are her prospects in a head-to-head with Donald Trump, assuming she's the nominee and she makes it past Bernie Sanders?
Well, look, unlike her husband, Bill Clinton, who I thought was a very good economic president working with Newt Gingrich and the Republican majority, unlike her husband, Mrs. Clinton doesn't have a pro-growth economic message. And as you noted, all these issues of government spending and higher taxes, and she's staying away from corporate tax reform. And I think that hurts her. I think that hurts her a lot. And when you look at polls, the Trump economic message is far more popular than Mrs. Clinton's economic message, and the economy is the #1 issue. So she doesn't have a message. I think she's going to be in trouble. In terms of forecasting the November election, Raymond, that may be beyond my pay grade to do such a thing. But I will tell you this. As I said earlier, this could be a very close race or not. But it is not going to be a landslide against Donald Trump. He has a solid core of supporters, and they're growing. And I myself believe that Trump is the pro-growth candidate in this race, and Mrs. Clinton will be the anti-growth candidate in this race. So how that's going to play, I think it puts her at a disadvantage. But it's only May. The election's in November. We shall see.
Larry Kudlow, always great talking to you. Thank you for your insights. And Larry is on the radio, The Larry Kudlow Show. Fantastic listen. So, Larry, thanks for being with us. I hope to see you again soon.